Hello everyone, and welcome back to Introduction to OPCloud. In today's session, we're going to continue to talk about advanced calculation and simulation with OPCloud. Specifically, we're going to do some more enhanced computational calculations. For today's session, in order to give an example of how we're doing calculation with OPCloud, we're going to do a point slope calculation. Meaning we want to calculate the slope with 2 points. A simple mathematical equation, but that will demonstrate how we can use OPCloud to do calculation. The first thing we want to do is to define our 2 points. Let's drag our objects, point 1 and now, let's add the process. We call it point slope calculating. We now want to add point 1 and point 2 as instrument to our process. Now, as we want to define more complex calculations, we'll use stereotypes, as we've seen before. First, let's select our point 1 and add a stereotype called point. Please note that this is an organizational stereotype, meaning that not all organizations have this stereotype, as it can see in the icon of the model of the stereotype. Here you can see the G, which is global, meaning available to all users in OPCloud. And here it's without a G, which is only organizational stereotype. So let's set point 1 and point 2 as stereotype of point. You will be able to see that in the OPD tree, the stereotype point was added. Let's see what is composed for. We can see that point have an x and y parameters, and each of them is a computational option. Now, if we go back to our system diagram and we'll bring the point 1 and point 2 parts, we will be able to see those parts and set them. So first, we brought point 1, x and y. We'll need to arrange them a little bit. Here we can see we have point 1 and point 2. And we'll do the same for the second part. Now you are able to see that we have x and y for point 1 and x and y for point 2. We can now fill their value. For our example, let's fill the value 1 as x and 7 as y for point 1, and 5 and 19 as the value for point 2. Again, we need to create an object which will contain the result of our calculation. We'll connect it. We can do first change it into computational. We don't have the value, and we can define the alias as m. We'll change the name to slope. And now we'll go to our point slope calculating. But first, as defined before, the use of aliases. The use of aliases allows us to call specific parameters that connect to the computational process without the need to specify the full name of that process. Here you can see that I have several options. We have the x and lowercase x and y and lowercase y, but in between we can see that point 1 and point 2 are 2 words, meaning we have point and 1. and we have point and 2. And if we want to call x and y, we cannot do it directly, as in OPCloud and computational processes using code, which we right away see, we cannot use it directly. We'll need to add alias as a mediator, even if the object is not computational. This is what the alias button is for. Now, let's add alias for our convenience. We'll call point 1 as alias p1, and we'll call point 2 as an alias for point 2, which is, of course, something very nice for us, because we can now call x and y. Now let's define the calculating function. In order to define the calculating function, as you know, we can select it or from the secondary toolbar computation, or going through the Halo menu, selecting computation, and now we have the user defined. Here it's a function written in TypeScript that we can change as we want. The return a plus b is just the default. We can change it. Now let's define what our function is. The equation for calculating a point slope is not so complicated. We need to take the 0.2y minus 0.1y and divide it by the x values of 0.2 minus 0.1 x's. So let's do it. We'll use the aliases. P2.1 will refer to 0.2 y value minus 0.1 dot y value in this second one, and we'll divide it with 0.2 x value minus 0.1 x value. You need to pay attention that we need to remain code in integrity of TypeScript, which is a subset of JavaScript, but we can do whatever we want to do in those parameters of TypeScript and JavaScript. Later on, we'll see more advanced calculation using the user-defined function. We'll click the update, and as we can see, now point slope calculating is defined as computational process, and the tooltip show our functions. Now, if we want to perform and execute this calculation, we'll again click on the execute and do the sync execute. As we can see, now the answer is 3. The slope value is 3. We can, of course, change the value and do again, as we've seen before, simulation of the values and so on. It is important to remember that OPM and calculation with OPM are consistent with the OPM methodology, meaning that a process needs to have its instrument defined. But once we define a specific instrument, we can use it as its part as part of the computational process using the aliases. Like here, we have 0.1 and 0.2 and their parts. We can use the parts as defined in OPM, meaning that if we have the refinee object, we can use its part, even though the link is only connected to the refinee itself and not specifically to its part. Later on, we can see how we can use it even in different diagram, as long as we maintain this consistency of OPM methodology. This is it for today. Thank you.